Hi everyone, welcome back to the Blood Ties podcast. I'm Molly Wansell and I am here with my father, Geoffrey Wansell.
Hello everyone, welcome back.
And this is a very special Christmas episode, so we are also here with Stuart Blues.
Hello.
Hi, how are
Christmas.
you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks.
I'm very good. Thanks for having me on.
So much for joining us. We're very excited because obviously Geoffrey's been on your podcast and now we're having you on our podcast. And you've been hosting the British Murders podcast for a long time, 5 years,
yes,
I think.
5 years. I think
Is it nearly your anniversary?
Yes, December 3rd.
Crikey.
5 years.
Well,
amazing.
That changes your life. We started in 2017, I think.
Really?
Wow. And went on for a long time. Then we had a little gap.
We did have a little break. This is what do you call this? Blood Ties
2.0. This is Blood Ties 2.0. Because when we started, there weren't really many. And Molly said to me, we should do a podcast. We should do a podcast. And I said, what's a podcast? I've never heard of it. And so I now know what a podcast is, Stuart. You've been doing it a long time, so you know too.
What was your inspiration for starting the podcast?
It was COVID, to be honest. It was. I started with a failed project. So me and my friend started a podcast in probably July 2020. I think we might have been in the second lockdown at that point, something like that. And we were very bored. So we thought, we like podcasts. Let's talk about some stuff. But unlike Geoffrey, we're not famous.
Well, I'm not famous here.
You are in these circles. Who wants to hear two West Yorkshire lads talking about random things? It turns out not many people. So what we started doing is similar to this. We would get guests on. A few of my friends had fairly interesting jobs, so I'd bring them on, interview them. The guy I did it with didn't enjoy it as much as he thought he would, whereas I really took to it. And I thought, right, I'm going to sack this one off and I'm going to start my own, learn from the mistakes. The name was poor. The concept was poor. So I niched it down to true crime. I've always liked that, thanks to my mum. And when I picked the name, I settled on British Murders because what I wanted was, if you asked 10 people, what's your show about? I wanted at least 9 to be able to guess based on the name. It wasn't the first name I chose, though. I was trying to be too clever with it. I think Ghastly Delights was one of my rough drafts. Yeah, I pulled that face as well, looking back on it. It's just nothing, is it? It's so generic. But I settled on British Murders, and yeah, it's just been going now for 5 years later. Here we are.
And when we started, we also wanted to try and do exclusively. We started exclusively with British true crime, didn't we?
Yeah.
And are yours still all listener suggestions or alongside your interviews?
Yeah, so it got to the point where I was just picking them at first. So my first couple of seasons, I was focusing more on the killers, the infamous ones, Moe's murderers, Robert Maudsley.
Yeah.
I forget the others. And it's only since attending stuff like Crime Corner or going to talks at the library, hearing from family members of victims, when I thought, actually, I'm not doing this the right way in focusing on the killers primarily. So I started asking for episodes because there's a lot of people who have local cases that don't get the coverage that the mainstream media will have. So I thought, well, that's quite a good thing. Give people a little shout out for the troubles. It then got to the point where I've got a spreadsheet now with over 400 suggestions on, which I worked out if I did one a week, it'd take me 8 years just to cover that spreadsheet. So I actually stopped asking for suggestions at that point because I've still got probably 20 emails in my folder that I've not replied to yet.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? It's like, we will never run out of subject matter.
No.
It just never stops. And I know that we might chat through a case in a minute, but they're all, really current. Every single day we see something that is, it's sad but true that we will never be contentless.
Well, it's interesting because the level of interest, the level of excitement never seems to drop. There's always a fascination. And certainly you're absolutely right. I'm very conscious of the point about we can always name the killer, but we can't name the victim.
Mhm.
And I think victims, and particularly victims' families, pay a tremendously high price for something they had nothing to do with. And it's literally forced upon them by an independent individual. And that is ghastly. And I've talked to so many survivors, as I'm sure you have, who I mean, their lives are torn apart by something they've got no control of. It's just happened to their daughter or their brother or their father or whomever. And it's that if there's any one moral I think I've got, it's that we must never forget the victims. We must never forget the victims' families.
Stuart, how do you deal with that we come across that too, which is like what we're doing essentially, as you say, is looking at these cases. How do you keep it in your, in every week that you're not glamorizing what they're doing, that we're telling their stories without glamorizing them?
I think I basically start with the way I research is I bullet point everything and I make sure it's chronological. But the way I start it is with the victim first of all. Now, as you've touched on there, the victim isn't just the person killed. It's the surviving friends, family, colleagues, which is important that we remember. I try and word that in whenever I can. But I will just start with talking about the victim's background. The information isn't already always there, but when it is, it's important to just talk about how these people were just regular.
Yeah.
And that sounds like you're downplaying their personality, but it's not. That most people in the world are just ordinary people going around their lives. What could they have been? A common theme I see is people who could go on to be such a vital member of society, often in the healthcare service. A lot of people I cover are either trainee nurses or they go to medical school or they're social workers. That's a common theme I see. I don't know if you've seen that, but I'll just make sure I focus on the victim's background, progress to the timeline. The perpetrator only gets introduced typically after an arrest is made towards the back end of my episodes. If there's information about their background, I will put that in. Some people might not agree with that, but for me, I like knowing what possibly led someone to do what they did. So whether that's a traumatic childhood, whether that's mental health problems, or they've just got in with a bad crowd, whatever it may be, none of it justifies killing someone. But I think it's important to know what may have led up to what happened. It's not always relevant, but that's the way I work through it. So the victim's always first and foremost. The perpetrator comes in towards the end, and it just ties together. But chronological is the main thing. I struggle when a case goes, here's what happened on this night, but let's go back 20 years. So let's jump forward to the trial. For me personally, I find that hard to follow. So my format is designed for me as a listener. And I just hope that other people have the same.
Sounds a very good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would try to do something similar, don't we? With you telling the story in a particular way and me being able to be the listener who doesn't have any information, is able to ask the questions that hopefully people are thinking when they're listening to Geoffrey, and like challenge where necessary, and make sure that we're really thinking of representing everyone.
Yes, and I think there's one of the things that makes it interesting that what Molly and I do is that I will have a certain generational attitudes to things. Obviously I'm 80, you're going to have a lot of different experiences. Well, Mo could always bring me up and say, no, you can't say that. That's not right. And that's very good. I think it makes it exactly, it's like the audience out there shouting, no, that's, hang on a minute, that can't have that. And I think that's one of the elements that makes this so interesting to do as the two of us. And also the fact that we talked about murder for a long time. We used to have lunch every Saturday. And we talked about murder often. Not exactly what you might describe as the commonest of father-daughter conversations.
Well, you mentioned your mum, Stuart, and her being an influence on you and enjoying true crime. Where did that come from?
I just remember as a kid walking through the living room. I think the first time it ever entered my subconscious was she had the book Wicked Beyond Belief about Peter Sutcliffe. Now, as a kid at the time, I didn't really read for pleasure because I would just watch telly or play a video game. But I remember that book, to me, was the thickest book I'd ever seen in my life. And I couldn't believe that you could read something as detailed as that. And I must have asked her what it was about. And maybe she sugarcoated it. I don't know. I can't remember. But she told me what it was about briefly and who. And it was not just that. Whenever I'd walk through, there'd always be a true crime documentary on. She's still like that now, bless her. She's always got either true crime on or crime and investigation, one of the documentaries, or podcasts or reading books and all this. So I definitely get it from her, but it's kind of by proxy. So it's not that I was mega into it as a kid, but it's filtered down, as so many things our parents are into, whether it's music or film taste. That's filtered through by chance, I guess.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've still got Wicked Beyond Belief on my shelf over here.
Okay. It's a big book.
It's a big book, yeah, and a very, very good piece of work too.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult story to tell, and he does it, I think, extremely well.
Do you think? I think I've seen obviously that we've covered a lot of the same cases. Like the teacup poisoners, it's the first one we ever did.
Yes,
it's Graham
We've
Young,
done that,
yeah.
And I'm sure there's many, many others because we've both done a lot of episodes. But
so do you do it every week, Stuart?
Yeah, every week. Yeah. So it used to be when I started, I wrote, recorded, and edited 10 episodes before I started. The plan was release 3 episodes on day 1, which I did, and then 1 episode a week for 7 weeks after. The theory being that I will always be 7 weeks ahead. But after about 2 months, a little bit of, not laziness, but let's call it procrastination, caught up with me. And it's now at the point where my episodes come out on Thursday. I pick a case on Monday, which is great because it's not constantly in my head. When you cover that many, you have to figure out how to not let it affect you. And again, I feel awful saying it, but once I've done a case, I put it out of my mind as best I can, which sounds like I'm dismissing it. It's self-preservation, is that?
Geoffrey talks about that a lot.
Absolutely. You've got to put it out of your mind because otherwise it does, if you look at the monster starts looking at you. And
exactly. That's it. It happened once. The only one time it's affected me was when I covered the case. And again, I forget the young lad's name. And it was a bad case. He was a teenage lad. He got killed, possibly sexually assaulted. I've covered that so many times. There was no reason that one in particular should have affected me. But I think it was an amalgamation of the straw that broke the camel's back, proverbially.
Yeah.
And I was just really, really down for a couple of weeks to the point of thinking, this is just, the weight of it just got on me for some reason. I did snap out of it, but I think you just have to be so careful when you're doing this all the time. You have to have other interests. So listening to podcasts now or reading or watching true crime is a bit of a busman's holiday now because I do it so much. I have to have other interests because if not, my head will go somewhere quite dark, I imagine.
Well, I think that genuinely that is a danger. And I really do watch a lot of true crime and I read a lot of true crime and I review crime and thrillers. So I spend an awful lot of my time doing that. And it is difficult. You have to be very strong and you have to be really very disciplined. I think it's the only way you can cope with it and be as disciplined as you possibly can be and compartmentalize as much as you can. Because if you start taking it too much to heart, you become very depressed, really, really depressed very quickly. So I just wanted to talk one case through with you because this is a perfect introduction to it.
Mm-hmm.
You may remember it's a man called Bhim Kohli. He was an 80-year-old man who was walking his dog in a park on the outskirts of Leicester. He had his dog called Rocky. And 2 children at the time, very, very young, attacked him. They hit him with a shoe. And they pushed him to the ground. They kicked him repeatedly for no reason, apart from the fact that the girl, we'll come to the names in a minute, but I'm just focusing on the victim here to take your lead. For no reason, this old man was doing, I think it was a Sunday afternoon, late afternoon, when he went for his walk. He usually did. This couple, a boy and a girl, had seen him regularly. There was a group of teenagers, but very young teenagers, incidentally. And these two particularly had, well, it was extraordinary that they decided for absolutely no reason to attack him. They said later that they never intended to kill him, but in fact, the beating was so severe that he died in hospital the next day in Leicester. Now, it's one of those simply senseless crimes. There's no motive. There's not a sexual motive. There's not a financial motive. It's not a revenge motive. It's sheer pleasure. Oh, well, we didn't mean to kill him. That, in the end, is why they weren't charged with murder, but with manslaughter. It's a very interesting, and I'd like your view, actually, about this one. Just get to the end of it, if you like. The boy, who was, well, perhaps should remain nameless, actually, was the man who actually did the worst. The boy really inflicted the injuries, and the girl egged him on. She told him that she thought the old man had a knife, which he clearly didn't have a knife. I mean, if you look at the pictures, you remember that famous little bit of CCTV of him walking across. It was just 100 yards from his house, where he lived with his daughter. And this is a frail little old man with a dog. And she says, oh, he's got a knife. Nothing could be further from the truth. But by this point, the folie à deux had really kicked in, and the two of them attacked him. And what I think, the daughter, called Susan Kohli, very upright. She said afterwards, and I think it's one of those awful quotes, these two can rebuild their lives, but we can't. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that the boy, who couldn't be named because they were both under 16, the boy gets 7 years custodial sentence. It's in a young offenders institution, and she gets nothing at all. She gets, I think it was 3 years youth rehabilitation order, and a 6 months of wearing a curfew thing, round your ankle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, the horror of that, I can't see, in all honesty, why the jury weren't allowed to convict them of murder, because it was joint enterprise murder, a phrase we're both familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
and yet she walks. And can you imagine how that family felt, how the Kohli family felt about it? I mean, it's utterly horrifying. And their nice, aged, frail father goes out for his normal Sunday evening stroll with the dog, and the daughter finds him lying on the ground. I mean, the children run away, of course. It's that sort of thing. That can really get you, I think, that kind of story.
It can. I think a lot of the sentences baffle me, especially regarding the manslaughter thing. I'm assuming with that one, their age played a factor, which you could argue both sides of the coin,
Yes.
I think. Because kids nowadays, I mean, when I grew up, I wouldn't dare do half of the stuff that I see kids doing now. I think recently to Bonfire Night, they're firing fireworks at police officers and at shops and at people. I picked my daughter up from school yesterday. She's 7. And as we're walking to the car, the road we park on has speed bumps on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a young lad in the car, and he had a girl in the passenger side. speeding down. He must have been going 50 mile an hour. And you think, one wrong turn, not only could you hurt yourself, you could hurt me, my daughter, or anyone else. I don't know what it is about kids these days. This lad must have been 20 or something, not even as young as this. But one thing that does annoy me as well, and I get why they do it, is the anonymity thing for kids. They couldn't be named for legal reasons. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think they should be publicly named, or do you think that's not wise?
Well, the other case, which is an exact parallel to this, really, is the killing of a trans girl called Brianna Gay.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge ordered that they were both convicted of her murder, joint enterprise murder. They were both aged under 16, and the judge in the case, at sentencing, decided the public interest demanded that they should be named. And they were given long custodial sentences, both. The girl given 22 years and the boy a minimum of 20. And they were both named. I'm always confused about sentencing. It's a really difficult issue now. You talk to the judges about it, they admit it's difficult. They're trying to follow the guidelines, but there's also public outcry. I mean, why? This is ridiculous. If we're going to lower the voting age to 16, surely we should be lowering the age in which we can name a perpetrator. It makes no sense to me. It's completely confusing. Why should the anonymity be granted to people who have committed heinous crimes? I'm absolutely baffled by it.
It's the subjectivity of the sentencing
Mm-hmm.
that baffles me, because one judge wouldn't give him that sentence, let's say, of the 7 years you mentioned for the lad. Another judge may have given longer or less.
Mm-hmm.
The same goes with these guidelines. If it's this case, it's got to be a minimum of this. Well, you might give 35 years, another judge might give 30 years. It's one of those jobs where I don't envy.
Well, the Court of Appeal
at all.
The Court of Appeal struggles with it too. Just to console yourself, they too don't always know what the guidelines. You know, there are a thing called the sentencing guidelines,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got to tick various boxes along the degrees of horror and all of the rest. I wrote a book about people who have whole life terms and how those rules have changed and what makes the difference. But it is confusing. So you can, for example, have someone who gets a sentence of 42 years, it's appealed as too lenient. And you get someone who gets a sentence of 25 years and it's regarded as too excessive. I mean, it is genuinely, the criminal justice system is struggling, not just the prisons. The criminal justice system in this country is struggling. And we're having a particular case, and I completely agree with you, we have a real issue with young people and violent crime now. Not just knife crime, but all kinds of violent crime.
It's interesting because after the LNAR stabbings, I think it was a week or two ago at this point now, there was concern for people riding public transport, which, if you think about it in the grand scheme, the amount of incidents, not necessarily knife crime, but the amount of incidents per train ride is so low in the grand scheme that really you'd be daft to think you can't travel on public transport. The reason I mention it is because when I went into the city centre last night, and it's a 5-minute train journey, even me as a 36-year-old guy, I still made sure that I was sat on a chair at the back of the carriage with no one able to sit behind me. Stuff like that is going to creep into society. Constantly being on edge, looking at people that you think you're not sure about. And it's creating division, really, between us as a society. And I'm not talking about between races or religions. I'm talking people in general. No. If someone comes on that you're not happy about, whether it's how they're acting, you know, if they have a bag that they could be concealing something, that's my concern, is that societally, we're all just going to be out for ourselves at some point. It's worrying.
It's a conundrum that all Western societies are struggling with, because we have become desensitized. And I can go long, we can make a great long argument about where that began and how it escalated. But there is no doubt whatever that we have become desensitized. and we are therefore also more fearful. I was thinking of public transport. The case that immediately leaps into my mind is the poor girl who was on her way to school. It was in Croydon, and she was on the bus. And when she gets off the bus, the boy arrives with a knife and kills her. She thought he was giving her back her teddy bear. I mean, these are genuinely terrifying events, and somehow we just take it as normal, and it isn't normal. It's not commonplace.
It's not. We see it all the time on the news, don't we? It's another stabbing's happened, and rather than go, wow, that's ridiculous, we're sort of going, oh, another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wish we had time to continue talking about all of these, but this just goes to show that we, as I said, sadly will not run out of content. But Stuart, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's been wonderful, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.